Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak on Citizen Television, and thank you for staying with us. Later, we sample your feedback on the hashtag Daybreak at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. Peter Abwao is the communications manager of the Kenya Red Cross, which is an actor on the front lines in reaching out to the Kenyans who are affected by the drought in the country. Mumina Bonaya is the woman MP, the county of Isiolo, one of the most affected counties, according to the report by the National Drought and Management Authority and the Kenya Red Cross. And also we are joined virtually by Dr. Kinyanjui Kwaimbore, who is an agriculture and climate change expert and is an expertise on matters climate change. And we'll be taking a look at the numbers of the people who have been affected and also the non-traditional counties that the NDMA says have equally been affected, including parts of Kieni in the county of Nyeri. I begin with you first, Peter Abwao. As an agency on the front line in reaching out to Kenyans, what's the extent of the drought problem?
Thank you, Ayub. Let me begin by saying that the drought has been with us for at least 3 years, right? 3 years now. We've been responding and talking about this drought from way back as early 2021. Mm-hmm. So that then begins to tell you that the situation has progressively worsened. Mm-hmm. Rain season after rain season, that the rains either don't come or they come and they are not sufficient, more people fall into the need bracket. That is why now the number of counties when we began was just about 10, but now that number has grown to 29. Mm-hmm. The number of people began from just about 2 million in the middle of 2021. This number has progressively grown to now 4.35 million. Okay. And we are now talking about a possibility of this number rising to 5.1 million just at the beginning of 2023. And we're waiting for the assessment report by the NDMA for the last short rains, which ended in the October, November, December rains, and which will now give us exactly how this number has progressed. These counties, especially the counties in the Asa region, counties like Isiolo, Marsabit, Turkana, Mandera, Wajir, Samburu, these counties, Garissa, these counties have huge percentages of the populations unable to feed themselves. We are having malnutrition levels going very, very high. And this is because also we know that as the drought has gone on, livestock has virtually been decimated. We are talking about between 60 to 80% of the people's livestock actually having died as of now. Okay,
we'll be taking a look at the numbers because so far the money spent on the livestock offtake program by the government is 1.4 billion Kenya shillings. But as you point to a grim picture heading into the year 2023, then that means the condition is outpacing the assistance that state and non-state actors are both rolling out and reaching out to the vulnerable. I mean, what more needs to be done then by agencies like you and the national government, and how are the levels of collaboration between you?
I'm afraid we have to do a lot more. We continue to appeal for a lot more to be done. As you rightly put it, the numbers are growing probably faster than we can actually respond. We have had a very, very close collaboration with government. We know that His Excellency the President recently established a steering committee which is also leading efforts to fundraise within the private sector. We're working with other agencies like the Kenya Meat Commission, the NDMA, to make sure that the response is very well collaborated. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So,
Honorable Mumina Bonaya, your county is among, according to the NDMA, the 22 counties in the alarm phase of the drought: Marsabit, Samburu, Turkana, Wajir, Isiolo, Kitui, Kajiado, Kilifi, and Mandera. I mean, is the level of response equivalent to the effects of the drought and the people who have been affected, for instance, in your county?
Thank you, Ayub. Just to straightforward answer your question, the level of response is way below the situation on the ground. I just came back from the field a week ago, and we leaders are the people who interact with locals every other day. You get a phone call, you're being told that there's no water. You get a phone call, you're being told that there's too much hunger, there's need for food and all that. Unfortunately, the level of response that we are receiving is not equivalent to the dire situation on the ground. And I think we need to call for more action. Because if we don't do that, then we will soon get to worse situation where we are now talking of saving human lives. It's no longer about the livestock. Because for livestock, I think for a very long time, we've observed, you know, the livestock die. I'm surprised that there is 1.4 billion spent on off-take program. I'm just asking myself where and when. If we had 1.4 B spent on off-take program, then we will not be talking of people who are moving from, you know, herding to urban because they've lost all their herd. I was in the field the entire week. You couldn't step anywhere because of carcass, animal carcass. So is it right to say that there was off-take program really?
That's what the government says. I mean, you're talking about the impact it ought to be having, especially in terms of the communities that who depend on as the economic activity, pastoralism. I mean, is this not an exercise that you can account that never happened in Isiolo County?
I have never seen any off-take program happen in my county. I don't know about other counties, but in my county there was none. Unless it happens going forward, there was none. So what we are experiencing right now is food insecure household. People are going hungry. That's number one. Water is a problem, both for herd and human. Counties are really trying to address the situation, but they are overwhelmed. My expectation was that national government will come in to support the counties on the same, because there's need to upscale food relief. There's need to upscale, you know, cash transfer. There's need to look at the livestock sector within the crisis that we are now facing in terms of food supplements, in terms of animal feed, in terms of emerging livestock diseases because of, you know, the current situation. Herders are moving with their animals from one county to another. For example, in Isiolo County, most of the herd has been moved to Tana River. That means that there's likelihood of, you know, insecurity, fights between the community. So there's need to support all that process. We are talking of reopening schools. Where will the pastoralists get the school fees to send their children back to school? Because they can't take their cattle to the market and fetch any value for it. So what will they do? Are we prepared to ensure that schools get water? Because there will be likelihood of, you know, sanitation crisis. Are we prepared to feed these children? Because there's hunger all over. So there's all these that is hanging over our head, but nobody is saying anything about it. That is my worry. And my appearance here is actually to call for action from the state and non-state actors.
Okay, we'll be talking about the numbers of children who are affected by the drought. And let's talk about the agriculture bit here, Dr. Koimburi Kinyanjui. And the NDMA says that because of the failed rains and farms across the country that have been invaded by fall armyworm, this is likely to compound the already existing food insecurity in the country. Yes, Dr. Ari?
Studio. Thank you so much. Hope you can hear me.
Yes, Dr. I can hear you. Go ahead, please.
Yes, it is true that agriculture is at the backbone of Kenya, especially in terms when it comes to the economic contribution.
Yes, Dr. I can hear you. Go ahead.
And something that I want to say in terms of agriculture is that...
Okay, Dr. Just switch off your television set so that we can have a clear communication line to have clear. to get your account clearly. And just to get the question again, the NDMA says the failed rain seasons and the farms that have been invaded by fall armyworm is likely to create or compound the already existing food insecurity in the country. Again, we are talking about drought.
Yeah, so when it comes to the issue of agriculture, you have to put in mind that Kenya is actually reliant on agriculture. And when you talk about drought here, we're talking about the prolonged period of without rainfall that is in Kenya. And when you talk about drought, we have three types of droughts. We have meteorological drought, we have agricultural drought, and also we have hydrological droughts. That's how drought is exhibited. So actually here in Kenya, we have seen areas that have been known to be agricultural areas such as Nyeri and even Meru. They have been categorized as in the alarm area or alarm stage. And this is something that we need to take key note of. So moving forward, we need to look at long-term measures as opposed to giving relief food and even cash transfer programs, which are actually short-term periods or knee-jerk reactions. So we need to look at how can these people live within these arid areas? How can they actually engage in agriculture that is actually irrigated? So we need to move away from rain-fed agriculture, which we have seen that is not working. Right now, we are talking about we have 5 seasons of rainfall which have failed. That is as far as 2020, with the last one being the October, November, December rainfall, which actually failed. And actually, the meteorological department has said that we should brace ourselves for a longer drought period going as far as June in 2023. So what I'm saying is that the government, as much as it is working towards fighting climate change, we need to see a concerted effort between the 3 ministries of 4, that is agriculture, we need to see the Ministry of Water, the Ministry of Air Soils, even education, and even the environment working together towards ensuring that food and actually agriculture within all sectors is secured.
Okay, thank you, Dr. But when you talk about the long-term priorities and moving away from rain-fed agriculture, to be specifics, break down for us, what are these long-term measures that state and non-state actors need to exercise? Because, again, the projections are that we are going to have a longer dry period, even according to the statement by Rebecca Miano, who is the Cabinet Secretary for the East African Community, ASALS and Regional Development.
Yes, thank you for that, and I hope you can hear me well still. So when it comes to the issue of moving away from rain-fed agriculture, of which over 90% of the farmers depend on rainfall, what I'm saying is that we can invest in areas that are known to be food baskets in Kenya, so that they can be able to feed these areas which are already hunger-stricken or which are already airsols and can actually become self-food sufficient. So here I'm talking about the areas of even Mount Kenya regions, be it Nakuru. And maybe something else that I need to point out is that we need to also have concerted efforts of water tracking. I need to put in perspective that globally we have 70% is water. And out of this 70%, which is water globally, it's only a handful of it. That is because 97% of this 71%, which is water, is salty. It's only 3% which is fresh water. And out of this 3%, it's only 1%, less than 1% that is available to humans, because most of it is in glaciers, is in frozen water. So what I'm saying is that we need also to invest in water tracking. We need to invest in water harvesting, so that we can see how best people who are living in arid areas can have access to water when it is not there.
Okay. Peter, I come to you. Being on the front lines, I mean, when we talk about the cash transfer programs that, for instance, the government is undertaking through the National Drought and Management Authority, NDMA, to address the current drought situation in the country, is that enough? Because you need water, and drought basically is the lack of water. I mean, how are you planning to have water harvesting programs in the foreseeable future and for long-term purposes? Because this seems to be a perpetual continuity problem. Where is the point of action for you?
Yeah, so you know, we are in an emergency response situation. So first, you know, as we talk about the long-term programs, which I really appreciate from, you know, the agriculture expert, is that people must find something to eat today. So these interventions, food distribution and cash transfer are not sustainable, of course. But we must provide immediate needs for people. So cash transfer are good in places where markets are still functional. And again, cash transfer, it helps build the market beyond the household. If there is, you know, the person can go to the market and buy food and all that. But beyond that, of course, we also have interventions in water. We've been working on rehabilitating boreholes and water pans that are still able to provide water, except that perhaps the water pump is broken or there's no electricity. So what we've been doing, we've done over 48 boreholes, installing you know, solar pumping machines. But you also have what we call the, you know, the vouchers for people to be able to purchase water. We have people going around with water boozers. So we are providing vouchers for people to purchase water. So importantly, these interventions have to be carried out simultaneously. You cannot work on long-term programs when people need food today. So those cash transfer programs, as much as they are not sustainable, but they are able to sustain the population today as we work on the more longer-term program.
Okay, when you talk about the intervention measures, and this was also a concern that was raised by a former PS, Nelson Marwa, during the food distribution program from Nairobi to the counties that have been affected. But how do you then ensure, because that was a question that also the government had raised, that the intended recipients are reached? Because the member of parliament representing Isiolo County says, for instance, that effect has not been felt in a county like Isiolo, according to her. I mean, what is the level of monitoring that the cash and the food aid does indeed reach the intended recipients?
Yes, and I feel exactly what the Mheshimiwa is talking about. The needs are enormous, and of course, most of the time you discover that you know, you respond, but because the need is enormous, sometimes that impact may not be felt. However, as the Kenya Red Cross, we work within the government structures. There is what we call the county steering group, which is where all this data around the areas that are affected is brought. And so all stakeholders are actually supposed to pick their data and the interventions and the targeting from this group. For example, in Isiolo, we are already having some distribution going on this weekend in the areas of Ngaremara. This was something that, you know, was obtained from the CSG, and our volunteers work with the local government structures, the chiefs, the deputy county commissioners, and they also live in those communities. So there is a proper process of registration, visiting these households and determining the level of need, and then being able to respond. We must emphasize that what we are doing has to be scaled up because of the needs that are on the ground. That is the message for us that we keep sending out. I know that because it's rained a bit, some people think that now, you know, the drought is reducing, or maybe there's not much need. But the rains have not done much to change the situation. This is the message that must go out there right away. The rains have not significantly changed the situation, and the needs have continued to grow.
Okay, Honorable Muminda, then your call for the scaling up of the efforts and interventions by both state and non-state actors. I mean, as the woman MP, getting the calls from the people who have been affected, what's your level of engagement, for instance, with the county administration in collaborating and rolling out efforts reaching out to the people who have been affected in your county, with the national government as a member of parliament? I mean, in your individual capacity, how have you tailored, I mean, efforts to ensure that you reach out to people who are reaching out to those who have been affected, especially in your county?
Thank you, Ayub. First of all, I want to say that the situation we are in currently requires that we show some concern for human lives and their livelihood. It's good to always think about long-term intervention, but at the moment, like he said, there's need to save lives. And I think that needs to be understood. As a leader, as a representative of the people, my concern right now is how can we feed this population? And the population we are talking about has grown from, you know, initially we had few households that were actually vulnerable. Right now, it's like the entire population is vulnerable. If those who had, you know, some level of herd, like 300 herd, somebody has gone home with none. So that means that more and more people are becoming poor. More and more are sliding into poverty. And that requires every effort that we are undertaking to be upscaled. So what does that require? Coordination. As a leader, I expected, as an MP, I expected that there will be a unit that will be coordinating between the national and the county government, so that the effort can be, you know, there's no duplication, it goes to the right place and all that. But so far, nobody, not even NDMA, has called us to a meeting where we need to coordinate anything, make input on anything, and, you know, observe the situation. Because it's a situation that requires, you know, a frequent meeting, so that we can see what needs to be done next, because it keeps on evolving. We are now facing a situation where livestock are dying as a result of emerging diseases. Who is talking about that? We are facing a situation where people are now moving with the herd to places where they think there's a bit of rain. So that will already overload other counties. For example, Tana River, where Isiolo people are moving to. That requires us to meet and discuss what needs to be done. We are looking at a situation where in the next few weeks, the schools will reopen and none of pastoralist learners will report back to school. Is anybody calling us from within the Ministry of Education to discuss this? Nothing like that. So we are lost. We are lost on this, completely lost.
Okay. Dr. Kinyanjui, when you talk about, this is what the CS, Rebecca Miano, did say, and the situation may slightly, according to her, improve, especially on environmental indicators. However, the gains are projected to be short-lived as the country heads into the normal dry spell of January to March 2022. She said that drought situation in the counties of Taita Taveta, Kwale, Garissa, and Tana River counties has improved. It's likely due to the light showers received during the last week of December. Does this not again create a multi-layer of complexity? Because this definitely attracts other pastoralists to come and herd their cattle, and therefore increases the levels of insecurity. Isn't it also another responsibility that the government needs to be looking into, because this is inundating the other counties that have received the light showers towards the end of December? Yes, Dr. Are you getting me? Dr. do we have you?
Yes. That is true. And actually, you have gone into one critical area, that is the effects of droughts, which is conflicts, the increase of conflicts, because pastoralists who actually have been affected so much by drought are actually moving into areas where there is pasture. And this has escalated in most of the areas, be it in Laikipia, be it in Baringo, and also other arid areas. The small interventions that we are seeing, maybe we are suggesting that they should put forth, is the provision of pasture and water, the way they are doing in the wildlife sector, where they're actually providing water pans, salt licks, they're providing hay, and all this food for these wildlife animals. The same should be done for these pastoral communities, because you cannot be talking about insecurity if we don't tackle the issue of drought, which has been exponentiated by climate change. And when you look at the pastoralists who are there, most of them, they have lost livestock. In the past 5 seasons, we have lost over 2.5 million cattle, and this calls for even psychological, it leads to psychological trauma. Most of these pastoralists who are living in these arid areas, the only livelihood they have, or even source of wealth, is these livestock. So when they lose these livestock, it leads to psychological trauma. Most of them, they're even hanging themselves, they're killing themselves. So what does the government need to do on this? I think there was also an initiative by the government. They said they will be buying these livestock from these farmers at a subsidy, and even going and selling it somewhere else. But I've not seen this working. And maybe one thing that I need to support on what the women rep has said on Isiolo is that these departments need to stop working in silos. We need to see the scientist groups, we need to see the politicians on the table who have been affected in those areas, all working together, giving solutions together, instead of one person working in one corner and then giving out a solution without the presence of those who are actually on the ground. And I also want to say that I'm very sorry also, and I want to send my apologies also to the people who have been affected by this drought issue, because Kenya is supposed to be self-sufficient in terms of food security, and counties which have enough food, they should work with other governors so that they can see how best this food can be transported to these other counties and be sold to these other counties at a lower price, because I'm very sure that there are other counties which are food secure.
Okay, when you talk about that, Daktari, food security, because what comes to the picture is, for instance, the mega food security project, Galana Kulalo, that President William Ruto has revived, and which collapsed because of corruption. The Israeli company that was contracted to undertake that business pulled out because of what it says was frustration by state officials, and saying this is the first project that failed for the first time in the history of Israel, and a company undertaken by from Israel. Therefore, then the question of corruption, to address this very pertinent matter of food security, because it's the backbone of the economy, that's agriculture. I mean, how important is it for the authorities to understand the very particular problem that if you are food secure and there's enough food, there's enough water harvested during the rainy period, then such instances like the current drought can be addressed. Is that well understood? Do they understand the mood music? Yes, Daktari?
Yes, thank you so much for that. And maybe something I need to reiterate on what you have touched in terms of, on what you have touched in ensuring that we become food secure, is that, let me give a good example of a nation like even Israel, where they've been able to take advantage, even Egypt, they've been able to take advantage of their arid areas and convert them to agricultural fields. And this has been through the concerted efforts of using greenhouses. And maybe there's a very hot debate that I also need to touch on, is the incorporation of GMOs. I know there are so many other ways we can be able to make ourselves food secure, from regenerative agriculture, from the use of hybrid cultivars. But what we are seeing is that our crops are not changing as fast as the climate is changing. So we need to also open our minds into the issue of GMOs, the genetically modified crops, and to see how best we can be able to invest into these, either by using crops that are drought resistant, to take advantage of this drought that is in these arid areas. And also the same, we need to remember that corruption also has affected most of these sectors, because when you're talking about even cash transfers, when you're talking about the food being donated and all these things, we need to streamline and see that we have a system that is tamper-proof to corruption, because once there's corruption, this food does not reach the people who are actually being affected highly on the ground. In fact, statistics that have been shown last year, at the end of last year, they showed that over 1.1 million people, which is set to increase, the children and pregnant women who have been affected by drought. And these are people we call the vulnerable communities. So what we need to look at, how can also the health sector come into and chip into this? Because when there's drought, there is a possibility of waterborne diseases, because people will be looking for sources of water where they're not supposed to be. So what I'm saying is that there are all these sectors in the ministry, be it the Ministry of Education, because we are seeing that areas that have been categorized as in the alert stage or alarm stage, so in the alarm stage, people are walking as far as 20 to 40 kilometers to look for water.
Okay.
Those areas that have been categorized as alarm stage, they are walking as far as 3 kilometers. So this one tells you that people will be dropping out of school, which are set to open in the next 1 week, and so that they can be able to look for this common necessity, which is water. So even the education sector will be affected moving forward.
Thank you. And when we get back from the break here on the broadcast, we talk about the consequences that are as a result of the ongoing drought in the countries, including schools that are likely to report under report of learners who are unlikely going to report in the counties that have been affected by drought and the increase in cases of gender-based violence, insecurity as a result of the scarce resources that is exacerbated by the drought situation in the country. You're watching Daybreak on Citizen Television, and we are with Peter Abwao, who is the communications manager, the Kenya Red Cross, the woman MP, the county of Isiolo, Mumina Bonaya, and Dr. Kinyanjui Koimbore, who is an agriculture and climate change expert. And we come back after the break with also the numbers of the counties that have been affected as per the projections of the National Drought and Management Authority, NDMA. Stay tuned.